Hi everybody, I'm Simon Pimenta from CFS Explored, and today I'm chatting to Sharleen Harty about her recovery story. Hello Sharleen.
Hello, Simon. Good to see you again.
And you, tell us where you are in the world.
I am in Ensenada, Mexico, which is south of San Diego, California.
Fantastic. So Sharleen, tell us a bit about your story. Maybe tell us what was going on before you got sick.
I went on global travels. I was studying and teaching in Africa and the Middle East, exposed to children and pathogens from all over the world. Um, so I think that was the trigger. I didn't get sick till 2014, and I did 10 years of research, Eastern and Western, which covered the period from 2014 to 2024, when I felt I had a complete picture to share.
Excellent. What happened? You got sick. What was your life looking like? What symptoms were you experiencing?
I'd moved to a very damp, humid island from very hot climates in Africa and the Middle East, and it was snowing. My um, energy declined by half, and it continued for 5 years to the point where I was homebound and bedridden and obviously couldn't work, in lots of pain and exhaustion.
And where was this? Where in the world were you now?
I was on Vashon Island, which is 20 minutes off Seattle, Washington by
Okay.
ferry.
Okay.
So very isolated from the world, and the doctors did not know what I had.
Okay. And what was the approach of the doctors?
I think for a lot of the time they thought I was mentally ill, and they put it down to psychological problems. But eventually, at 1.5 years in, they did a full blood panel of pathogens, and found I had reactivated Epstein Barr over 600 off the charts. They still didn't know what to do. They told me they did not study viruses in medical school, and they were told not to use antiviral.
Right. So they weren't really much of a help.
No, I felt very desperate. I did my own researches, which is why I have 10 years to share, and happy to do so. Eventually, I tried a Western antiviral, Veltrex, and it made me sicker. They give you 8 tablets a day for a full year, and I did blood tests, and the levels did not drop.
Right.
Subsequently, I moved to weekly acupuncture because the medicines were making me sicker than the virus. And the acupuncture brought me enough energy that I relocated to a hot, dry climate in Arizona. And I found another acupuncturist who handed over a native remedy called Lomatium, which started me healing, truly healing, and that it eliminated the virus. And I know this because I tracked off the charts blood test, middle of the treatment and after the treatment, and I went to normal and then zero within 6 months.
That's amazing. Tell us a little bit more about Lomatium, because I guess many
That
people haven't heard of it.
Yes, it's a Native American antiviral that was used in the 1918 Spanish flu very successfully. It has many other uses. It not only targets viruses, but other pathogens. And after I started using it, it was tested by an infectious disease specialist in 2019 and proven to kill all pathogens, which was very useful because right after I started my recovery, the pandemic of 2020 hit. And I knew that I had the medicine to keep myself safe. And this was before vaccines.
Yeah, very interesting. So it sounds like that's something that really helped you. Was there anything else that you tried that either didn't help or you found helpful?
Well, what was amazing to me is when I saw my first master acupuncturist in Seattle, he immediately diagnosed it as latent pathogens, knew what herbs to use, and told me if I lived in Seattle, he would treat me weekly. So that stuck with me, and I eventually went to weekly acupuncture, and it restored energy, healed damages, but it did not remove the viruses or pathogens. Only the native remedy Lomatium did that.
Amazing. So, when did you start taking that?
Um, the acupuncture I started 2018, the Lomatium 2019. And as I say, in about 6 weeks, I started to notice different behavior, feeling lighter. Um, and then by 3 months, I did a blood test, and then 6 months, another one, and the virus was zero with antibodies. And I specifically tested for Epstein Barr virus because that is still recognized as existing. I also turned out to have atypical polio, but it is not easy to diagnose and treat because most of the world thinks it's eradicated.
Right. And who diagnosed the polio?
I actually got it from the research. I had mumps when I was 20, and Dr. Dowsett from the UK did a lot of research on how mumps is misdiagnosed as polio because people think polio is eradicated.
Right. So
But the
it's
symptoms trigger ME.
so you're saying it's diagnosed as mumps, but it's actually maybe polio.
Exactly. And it will
Yeah.
trigger ME type symptoms, chronic fatigue, or if you have long haul COVID, those symptoms are similar to ME, CFS.
Right. And actually, it's probably worth saying that you have a background in research. Is that right?
Yes, I studied anthropology, so my approach is to research and document in minute detail. So I actually put this all together in a book called Home Alone 2020, which is free, and it's written for patients who are ill. So I include the most relevant information, Eastern and Western, so people can choose. There are options in every culture. As an anthropologist, I know these are not the only options. Probably every country in the world has something like this, but acupuncture and the native remedy worked for me.
Amazing. And what else is in your book? Can you tell us a little bit more? Just outline some of what you cover in the book.
Well, first of all, my story in detail, which is very complicated, but I kept it short. And then in detail, the research from four Western doctors, four acupuncturists, most of whom I saw, one acupuncturist who wrote a book, British Dr. Keown, who's also an emergency room doctor. And his book is called The Spark in the Machine, and it's brilliant. I also used a book called Emmy and Me, A Doctor's Struggle with Myalgic Encephalomyelitis, Chronic Fatigue by Dr. Hun. It's very useful to take to doctor's appointments, lawyers, and legal appearances in court because nobody believes that this is a physical illness. They tend to think it's mental or psychological.
Right. And let's talk a little bit about acupuncture because you know a lot of people think that acupuncture is kind of fake treatment, and I know from my own experience. I remember watching a program. This was years ago about acupuncture in China, and I was watching someone have surgery just with needles. And I'll be honest with you, when I watched it, I was in disbelief. And it's only, and I was kind of thinking, this is crazy. It was only when, I was working for an organization that supported men with mental health issues. And we used to have speakers come and talk about health topics. We had a woman who was an acupuncturist, and she did a demonstration, and three of us put our hands up to be guinea pigs, including me. I was feeling a bit fluey at the time, and she just stuck some needles, one needle kind of in this point here on both sides, on both hands. She stuck needles in one guy's knees. I can't remember the other guy. And all three of us, we just sat there for 5 minutes with our eyes closed. And afterwards, we all just said, I kind of felt better. And the other two guys were both saying, wow, I kind of feel very different. And I actually went and had some acupuncture because I was curious. And in those days, we didn't have the internet. I just followed my curiosity, and I had a football injury. Actually, I got an injury picking up my girlfriend, actually, and it meant I couldn't play football. And for a year, it was a kind of struggle to get out of bed. And I had about 5 treatments, and this issue went away, and I was able to play football again. And I've done a little bit of research, and I know that Professor Robert Sapolsky, who's a very respected scientist, talks about acupuncture, talks about the research in his book. And I know there's other people say, oh, the research is poor quality, etc. So how would you respond to people's questions about the validity of acupuncture as a treatment?
Well, it's 5,000 years old. Um, my experience was I walked into the office of a master practitioner, and it's important to get referrals. And he diagnosed me right away, and I'd been ill for almost 6 years with no clear idea what it was. And I went to another master practitioner who handed over the remedy in the first meeting. They look at the body as a whole. They spend an hour to 3 hours of the first session getting to know what's wrong with you and looking at you the whole time. And I compare that to my Western experience in America, where appointments are 14 minutes long. You're lucky if you get 7 minutes, and they don't look at you, they're typing.
Yeah.
So the attention you get alone and the bond you form with your practitioner is critical, because every week they address something different. If you have a chronic illness, if you have an injury like yours, you may only need 4 or 5 sessions. I recently had PTSD, had 4 sessions, and then got herbs. So if you don't, herbs is the same as herbs in English. Um, if you don't like needles, you can use those. And my practitioner said you can do Western and Eastern together. So you don't have to put your faith in something that you're not certain of. But my experience was I weaned off Western meds and used only this, plus the herbs and then the Lomatium to recover. And I think my system had been worn down by over medication.
Right.
And that is the Western approach, to break the body up into segments and to hammer the brain, the heart, the lungs, the gut with different medications. And if they don't work, to either increase the strength or change the brand.
Yeah.
And if you have intolerances of any kind, genetic mutations, you can't stand that kind of approach, and you may get sicker. But if you're very healthy genetically, it might work for you, provided you get a quick diagnosis.
Right.
I found that 5 years seems to be the critical time. And I think it's because the virus or the pathogen, because you could start with a bacteria or a parasite or fungi or mold, tends to multiply in the course of 5 years to the point where you can't function. And at that point, it's very hard to get out of the Russian roulette, because you can't think straight and you can't move. But there are alternatives. And speaking as somebody who studies anthropology, I respect the alternatives. I also respect the Western medicine, but I think you have to research your options just in case it doesn't work. And I've included a book in the books recommended that talks about all the diseases that can be treated and how it works. So I don't know how much patients can tolerate, which is why I tended not to go into depth or write more than 80 pages. But I do have a section on resources, so healthy people can refer to that, and the patients can use the outline in the book.
Right. Okay. But the other thing you mentioned, which I think is important, is that if conditions aren't treated, they can get worse. I know I was diagnosed by both a medical doctor and a herbalist as having candida, and when I looked into it, because I didn't know much about it, read some books, read some papers, I found that my symptoms were being described by the Candida diagnosis. And I know that's controversial because some doctors say if you had Candida, you'd be hospitalized. And I remember thinking, well, you know, there's a spectrum of not severe and severe. Why would you wait until someone's hospitalized before you start taking that condition seriously? That didn't make any sense to me. And actually, I followed certain protocols and my symptoms improved. So I know some doctors will say it's a dodgy diagnosis, it doesn't exist, but that was my experience. And as I say, that's kind of, you know, it was diagnosed by a medical doctor with degrees in nutrition and immunology, and the protocols that I followed did actually help. Didn't get me fully well, but I certainly felt better. So we'll pop the link to your book below this video, and I'll put the name of the herbs that you've mentioned as well, and we can link any other resources that you think are helpful. What advice would you give yourself with the benefit of hindsight when you first got sick?
I would have gone straight to alternative medicines because I also did DNA testing and now I know my genetics. I know I can't tolerate Western medicine. I have too many intolerances that are included in Western medicine, whether it's glucose, gluten, lactose. That alone is too much for me. And
Right.
then the side effects of competing medication was deadly.
Okay, because you
So,
mentioned one medication that you were on. Was there other medications that you were?
oh, as long as my arm, Valtrex was the antiviral I tried. I tried another one called oxymatrine, which didn't make me sick but didn't help. These are medications researched by doctors. Uh, on the flip side, the acupuncture and the Lomatium worked almost immediately and were gentle enough that I could tolerate them,
Right.
even though they're powerful.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
they're
Okay.
powerful medicine.
Yeah. So that's very interesting. And if anyone's watching this, I'd be interested if you've had any experience of the benefits or not of acupuncture, and also if you've tried this herbal remedy. Be very interesting to hear your experience. But I think it's really important to share these different stories because it might actually resonate with someone, and what you're sharing might help somebody. Any other tips that you'd give yourself? Any other advice that you'd give yourself when you first got sick?
Um, let's see. I was alone on an island, so I didn't have family support. If you can build a support system, not just doctors and specialists and research and alternatives, someone who's got your back, someone who loves you, it's enormously important, the power of love. And it was actually my family intervening, coming to the island, getting the doctors to back off on over medication, telling them I wasn't crazy, that I couldn't fight those battles myself
Yeah,
after 5 years.
yeah. And obviously it's very sadly all too often people with this condition are thought of as just being crazy, which is that is crazy.
Yeah,
Because if the doctor actually took the time to get to know the patient, they'd know that this was a person who was living a life, and wants to get back to life. So the idea that, they're kind of making it up, they're crazy, is just, as well as being very disrespectful, it's very unhelpful.
there's one tip that I told the doctors when they said I was depressed or clinically depressed or secondary depression. I said, I know I'm not depressed because I have dreams. And I've been, possibly clinically depressed postpartum where you don't have dreams. So I know the difference. I know if you're still thinking, if I got better, I would do this right now. I
Yeah.
wouldn't wait.
Doing things to try and get well is not the trait of someone who's depressed.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yes.
So, at what point would you say that you felt well?
Um, the time that I knew that the virus was gone, because not only did I blood test, but you can feel it. It's the most amazing feeling. Your body feels light, your mind feels clear. You suddenly want to do the things you haven't done since you've been bedridden and homebound, was 2019.
Yeah.
The turning point was when I started acupuncture because I got enough energy every week to stay alive, and the acupuncture was dealing with the damages from the virus and from the over medication and
And when
whatever other pathogens.
and when was that?
That was 2018, so I turned the
Right.
corner. But 2019, the viruses were gone, and I had blood tests to prove it.
Yeah, 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 yeah. Looking forwards, what have you got to look forward to, Charlene?
Well, I'm in retirement technically, but I'm healthier than I've been my whole life because I think I probably had Epstein Barr from birth. It's transferred from mother to child. So I am reading, writing, researching. Now that Home Alone is launched and I'm distributing it free, I'm starting a second book, which involves research. And actually, I have to do the field work in Africa, which is very convenient because my family is there in South Africa.
Amazing. So, thanks for sharing your story with us. Any final thoughts before we finish?
Well, for the patients, the book has a content section, it has a resource section, it has reader feedback. I have an Instagram account. I'm trying to make it as easy as possible for people who can't read the whole book to zero in on what they need, whether it's the Lomatium or the acupuncture or the Western research. And because it's digital, you can make it as large as you need and read a page at a time.
Yeah, that's fantastic. So, as I say, I will link to the book below. But thanks for sharing your story, Charlene.
You're welcome. Thank you for the interview.